Well, we have to recognize that we have a republic, which means we have a representative body that passes the laws that address all the issues any of these candidates are talking about, whether it's climate change, or the debt, or healthcare, or student debt. It doesn't matter what the issue is. But we have an institution of Congress that is basically crippled. It is the failed institution in our democracy, and it is crippled because it is no longer a representative body. It's not a representative body because it raises its money from the tiniest fraction of the 1%. It's not a representative body because they gerrymander districts so that the vast majority of congressmen don't even care what the minority in their district cares about, because the minority could never matter to their election. It's not a representative body because we suppress the vote all across the country through voter ID laws and similar techniques that make it harder for some people to vote than others. All of these are reasons why Congress doesn't work.
So how do you fix it?
Well, we fix it by recommitting to the idea of an equally representative Congress, a Congress that represents all of us. And the most important change to make is a change in the way we fund campaigns, so that when candidates for Congress are spending 30 to 70% of their time raising money, which is what they do now, they're not spending all their time raising money from this tiny, tiny fraction of the 1%. Instead, they're raising money from all of us. And that's the critical change that would make it so that the tiny fraction of the 1% no longer controlled what our Congress did.
And with regard to your presidential campaign, hoping to win, you had trouble getting on to the debate because you mentioned the rules were changed within the party itself. So given the divisiveness in Washington and just the trouble getting your voice out there and getting your voice heard, how do you plan to continue trying to affect change when there is so much divisiveness in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, so I plan to do whatever it takes. And we made a gamble when I ran for president that we could get enough support to get into the debates. We thought we'd do that in two stages. One is to raise a boatload of money very quickly, and then secondly to then manifest the support in the polls so that under the rules I would qualify for the debate. We did both of those things. We raised the money we said we would raise in less time than we said we would raise it, $1 million in less than a month. And we qualified by getting 1% in 3 national polls within 6 weeks before the second debate. But then when we qualified, they changed the rules. And that change was, for me, the most surprising thing. I would never have predicted that they would play that game.
But today, though, where do you go from that point? Because you're trying to secure a party nomination, and largely the issues you're talking about are against fighting Republicans. So when you can't get that support from the Democratic Party and you're trying to fight Republicans, what's the next step forward for you today?
Well, today I think the next step is to see what the strategy could be. I mean, I have an answer right now. Right now after I ran for president, I had to go back and teach an incredibly heavy burden of courses to make up for what I had given up. And I've just finished teaching this week, so I'm just beginning to try to catch my breath. But what many of us are doing in this movement is to find every single way we can to increase the pressure necessary to get Congress to do something. I participated in something called Democracy Spring, which started as a march from Philadelphia to Washington, and then sitting in at the Capitol. Over the course of a week, they had the largest number of arrests at the Capitol in the history of the Capitol, of people demanding that Congress take up changes to the way Congress funds its elections, because that's something it could do tomorrow. And so I think the question is, how many different experiments can we launch to try to create the pressure necessary to bring about this change? This year has been the most optimistic and the most pessimistic message on that. It's most optimistic because for the first time, even Republicans are talking about the corrupting influence of money in politics. Donald Trump totally defeated Jeb Bush because he was able to frame Jeb Bush as completely responsive to the money, and Donald Trump was independent of the money. That's progress. Yeah. And I think that the opportunity to have a broad base of people on the Republican and Democratic side recognizing this problem is exactly the conditions necessary for solving it. Now we've got to figure out what will push us over the top.
I had a couple quick final questions for you. We're here in North Carolina. HB2 just passed. Do you envision the courts striking it down anytime soon? And what would that time frame look like in your mind?
It's pretty hard to see how HB2 survives given existing law. It's pretty depressing that this is what conservatives are fighting about.